So we've made it to the end of 2024. This year has delivered a bunch of movies and TV shows that got people talking. Whether blockbusters or indie, whether sequels or originals, there's been a bunch of must-watch movies and TV. So here's my best of 2024 watch list. To help put together my watch list, I'm going to be using the 2024 Best of Watch List feature on IMDb, and I'm going to be using both imdb.com as well as the IMDb app. I want to see and share some of your Best of 2024 watch lists. If you create your own IMDb 2024 Best of Watch List graphic at the link in the description, take a picture of it, screenshot it, post it on Instagram stories or TikTok, tag me and use hashtag IMDb, and I will see and share some of your best of 2024 watch lists. Check out my IMDb Best of 2024 watch list for all of my favorite movies and TV shows of the year. The link down below in the description. And don't forget to create your own Best of 2024 watch list and share it on your socials. With that said, let's get started. Let's kick it off with a big one, the must-watch comic book movie of 2024. And for me, it's an easy pick, Deadpool and Wolverine. This movie was just a special event for Deadpool and Fox X-Men fans, as well as just the Fox Marvel Universe in general. It's one of the most entertaining films of the year. Ryan Reynolds is just so funny. He brings all of that to this movie, but with all the cameos, the guest appearances, and multiverse fun, it's able to bring a whole new bag of tricks for Ryan Reynolds to just riff off of. It was just fantastic to get to see Wesley Snipes back as Blade, finally getting to see Channing Tatum as Gambit in this just laugh out loud version of the character. And of course, Hugh Jackman returned as Wolverine, and he's able to riff off Ryan Reynolds and be really funny, but he also brings an emotional weight and dramatic gravitas that Ryan Reynolds just isn't able to bring to this franchise, because the whole point is he's always kind of winking at the camera, and so Hugh Jackman was just able to elevate the film and give it that emotional oomph. And because it was such a special event, it went on to become the highest grossing R-rated movie of all time by a pretty good margin over the previous record holder, Joker. So without question, this is the must-watch comic book movie of the year. In a totally different direction, romance, and I'm gonna go with The Idea of You. And this is a movie that I was actually able to see at its world premiere with my wife. And it was a film that, in particular for my wife, was very emotionally moving, because it's this story that it's got romance in there, it's got comedy in there, but it's also just a very relatable story about how no matter how old you are, how successful you've been, you're always still figuring yourself out. You're always still growing. And as for the romance side to it, you buy into the chemistry of the two leads, but you also buy into the conflict that makes their relationship incredibly difficult to navigate. This is a film my wife has literally watched this movie on loop the entire month of May. And so without question, this is my pick for romance. Now let's spend a little bit of time on television. I'm primarily a movie person, but I of course do watch a good bit of television. One of my favorite shows of the year was Reacher Season 2. This is the kind of show that my wife and I just like to put on, watch it, have fun with it. It's very much a throwback to a past era. You know, the Jack Reacher novels go back decades. And so they're designed to have that flavor of just the guy that shows up and solves the crime, beats up the bad guys, all of that fun stuff. And just the Reacher character is just so much fun to see on screen, because he is this physical presence in any room that he walks into, but he also uses his mind to like strategize and outthink people. So it just has a lot of good elements to it. My pick for the best comic book TV show of the year, I'm going with The Penguin, where I loved the Batman a couple years back when it dropped. Very excited to see more of this world. And a big part of that was because Gotham and the underground world was such a big part of what made that movie feel alive and believable. And this is a show dedicated entirely to that aspect of it, to the extent that you could make this totally detached from the Batman, DC Comics, and all the comic book lore, and it would just work as this compelling crime drama. But it also has that extra flavor to it because we are dealing with the aftermaths of the movie, the Batman, as well as our lead character is the Penguin. The show took a couple episodes to really hook me, but as soon as they did Falcone's backstory and everything that happened to her, and you realize, oh, she's kind of the antagonist to Penguin in this story, but she is not the villain of this story at all. And it just became such a compelling story. And it's a TV show that put a villain front and center as our lead character that didn't try and make him actually like sympathetic or misunderstood. It's like, yeah, here's a little bit like why he is the way he is, but he's the worst. He's a monster. It allowed a villain to be a villain. It allowed one of the iconic Batman villains to truly be a despicable character, but also made him compelling and interesting, that when he did these horrible things, you're mortified by it, but compelled at the same time. Now, as for my favorite episode of television, specifically comic book television, but the episode in general that I just absolutely adored from this year, the Superman and Lois finale. So a year back, they said they're only going to give him one more season. James Gunn kind of wanted to tighten up the DC output, so he said, let's close out Superman and Lois before my Superman movie comes out. And because of that, they designed the entire last season to build up to this very specific finale, where the first half of it is just a slam bang finale with all the Superman action battling Doomsday, Lex Luthor that you could want. And then it goes into back-to-back epilogues that are just so poignant and emotionally satisfying, that it's like they understood what Superman in this TV show was about and how to land on this note that is just very emotionally resonant. Last one in the television section, best video game adaptation. At the time I'm filming this, I haven't seen Sonic 3, so this might be just the best video game adaptation of the entire year, film and television. But as for just the television side to it, Fallout. This is just a fantastic show. I've never played the Fallout video games. I was curious about it because it's sci-fi and it's from Jonathan Nolan, Christopher Nolan's brother. And it was just such a fun, interesting change of pace where everything feels so detailed, everything has feels lived in, thought out, and whether you're doing the backstory of how we got to this broken world or playing it out, the mysteries, the characters, like all of it was just interesting and fun. You wanted to dive into everything a little bit more, and it felt like everywhere you went, there was another story to tell around that corner, another fun character that might as well be another main character on the show. Heading back into the realm of movies, we're talking horror. I got a couple of best of picks here. Both of them, for me, actually independent original stories. First one, Longlegs from Osgood Perkins. And to me, this was just such a fascinating kind of like throwback serial killer film. The way we talk about throwback action movies in the style of the 80s and 90s. This is a throwback serial killer film, taking inspiration from Silence of the Lambs, Seven, Zodiac, bringing in a bit of a supernatural spin on it. And then it's shot in a fashion where it was heavily influenced by like Kubrick with these wide angle lenses. And the framing of the shots, it just always has like a person dead center with a ton of space behind them. And it uses the sound design to fill in those gaps. So the smallest little noise or movement in the background freaks you out. I just thought it was really well done. Another one really well done, also another little indie film, Strange Darling. Not exactly a horror film, more of a thriller that just kind of keeps you guessing as to exactly what you're watching and how to interpret the events that are taking place in front of you. It acts as an unreliable narrator to the audience in a really fun, unexpected way that keeps changing the rules of the film that you are watching. Then we got my pick for the best streaming movie. It's also a great indie film. I'm going to go with Hitman starring and co-written by Glenn Powell, my close personal friend that I've only spoken to for 30 seconds. This one is kind of a genre blender where it's a little bit crime procedural, a little bit screwball comedy, a little bit dark comedy, a little bit of romance, kind of all blended together. It doesn't fit neatly into any one box, but it is very accessible, enjoyable, and as Glenn Powell playing a bunch of these different characters and toying around with the idea of identity and how much can you change, what can change you. So one that I really enjoyed. Then we'll go with my pick for just a fun blockbuster, and also the blockbuster starring Glenn Powell, Twisters, back-to-back Glenn Powell on this list. Now, I'm of the age where I remember when the original Twisters came out. It was this massive cultural phenomenon. I wasn't really sure would it work doing it again. How much would it just repeat things? How different would it be? And then they hired the director of a movie called Minari that came out a couple years back. It was nominated for Best Picture, but it's as a small personal drama about an immigrant family. And then, this is, Twisters is, the example of big dumb blockbuster. So how is that all going to work? Well, as it turns out, it worked wonderfully, and it is just an awful lot of fun. It delivers all of the tornado carnage that you want from a Twister movie. If you don't know, I live in Texas. We are in Tornado Alley. Most people that I know that live around here have some story of having to take shelter somewhere in a tornado, or you have a family member that has done that. My brother-in-law had to take cover in a Chili's just a couple years back, and the doors got ripped off of the Chili's. And so Twisters plays great where I live. Another thing that plays great everywhere is Glenn Powell. My wife and my neighbor across the street, they went to go see this movie multiple times in the theaters. They went to go see it in 4DX, and they took our daughters to go see it. So I've seen it a bunch. My wife's seen it a bunch. It's just a classic summer blockbuster that delivers all the thrills, a little bit of romance, a little bit of comedy, a little bit of emotion, and changes the formula up from the original one just enough to be fresh, fun, and original. We've got Best Documentary. This was a super easy one for me. Superman, the Christopher Reeve story. Now, I was born in 1981, so for my early years of life, the only superhero movies that we had were Christopher Reeve's Superman films until Batman 89 came out. And so he was such an important part of my childhood, and so are those movies. And his tragic accident in the 90s was one of those first times I realized that celebrities were just humans and they were vulnerable. And this documentary does such an amazing job of capturing the larger-than-life aspects of Christopher Reeve as well as his humanity. It shows the best of him and it shows the worst of him. His struggles, his failures, his victories with film, his setbacks, as well as all the ways that he kept persevering in the hardest of circumstances. Just a movie that drew out so many emotions from me. A victory of sadness, all of it at the same time. There's not a lot of documentaries that can move me the way that this documentary did. Real quick before we go into the final three categories, remember you can check out my complete IMDb Best of 2024 watch list for all of my favorite movies and TV shows of the year at that link down below in the description. And don't forget to create your own Best of 2024 watch list and share it on your socials. I want to see them and I want to share them. You just got to tag me and do hashtag IMDb. Use that link down below in the description to create your own graphic. Let's move on to animation. And there were two different animated movies this year that I absolutely loved. The first one came out over the summer. It was Inside Out 2. This is a film I was actually very excited to check out because I felt like the first Inside Out did lend itself really well to having a sequel, because the mechanism they came up with to explain our emotions and the way that we develop, I think, can apply to later stages of development and as you go more overtly into puberty and things like that. And that's exactly what this movie delivered, of showing these next phases of cognitive development, of maturity, of emotional development. Another thing that was cool about it is that it made Riley a more prominent character in the real world with a more overt plot. Not just that we're seeing how her mood is changing based off the events of the story inside of her. This one has a very clear plot outside and on the inside. And it almost plays like Mean Girls if you can like unpack what's happening inside of the lead character and why she's making such bad choices. It's not just an entertaining movie, it's a insightful and helpful movie, both for parents, for teachers, as well as for teenagers themselves to understand what's going on inside of them, as well as what's going on inside of their friends. Other animated movie I just adored this year, The Wild Robot. That I saw the trailers for it. I was like, okay, that looks kind of interesting. And then the buzz for it from the first screenings was great. I watched it at Fantastic Fest and I just fell in love with it. It's a movie that is able to cover so much ground, tell so much story, touch so many different emotions in so many different ways. As a parent, it just touched me. From beginning to end, it hit on all of these notes of letting go, the way you feel like you don't have enough control. But it also was about community and accepting people and not judging them based on the outside. It's about so many different things. It has a fantastic, rousing score to it. Just DreamWorks has had a really good last few years. Then for me, we've got Biggest Surprise. Now, as I say my pick for Biggest Surprise, a bunch of you are going to say that wasn't surprising at all. That was my most anticipated movie of the year. It was not my most anticipated movie of the year. I was not looking forward to this movie. So because I loved it so much, it goes on my biggest surprise list, and that's Wicked. Now, my wife, my daughter were obsessed with Wicked. They went to go see the traveling version of it here in Austin earlier this year. My wife dressed up as the Wicked Witch for Halloween this year, went full green and everything like that. And they'd planned out a big movie date to go see the movie together, so I couldn't take either one of them to the press screening. They were excited for it. I know a lot of you were excited for it. I've never seen the Wicked musical before, so I just didn't care. It didn't strike me as something I'd be interested in. And then I just thought it did such a fantastic job of creating such an immersive world where, like, not since the Harry Potter movies has a fantasy story done such a great job of just pulling you into this world where everything feels believable, lived in. Every normal thing that we do has some counterexample of how they do it in this crazy, wild way. Everything feels and looks huge. Even the way the dance numbers are done. They're on these huge sets with moving parts. There's one in a library with spinning shelves. There's 50 extras. The shots are long and wide so you can see everything. It's just so well done. And what's really surprised me about it wasn't that, it was a musical with great musical numbers, because, you'd expect that from a movie with this budget based off such rich, beloved source material. But the story itself is a lot more poignant than I expected, where it is about this outsider trying to fit in and the rejection that she faces. It's about discrimination. There's like all this political stuff in it too. And so it emotionally swells in a much more potent and powerful way than I was expecting. Final category, we've got Best Sci-Fi, and we are going with Dune Part 2. Now, I was a big fan of the first Dune, but I said when it ended, I really need them to stick the landing. And boy, did they stick the landing with Dune Part 2. Now, of course, as all Denis Villeneuve projects, the production is immaculate. Every single set, every single costume, every single visual effect is immaculate. It is utterly believable. Even when you're seeing kind of crazy things, you buy into them because they're so well thought out. Much like I've discussed with other things like Wicked, the world building, the level of detail, and everything that takes place, everything feels so thought out that you go, oh, that makes sense. Oh, in the way that, we're in this desert where there's so little water, and the way they live, what they do with water, what they do with tears, it just all feels like this believable, lived-in reality because they take the smallest details and they play out the implications of it. But then beyond that, it's just this really great way of both delivering the hero's journey while also subverting the hero's journey and flipping it on its head with all of these ways in which there's political manipulation, there's religious manipulation, but in other senses, Paul does fulfill these prophecies in a very true sense, but also a very false sense. And so everything that happens, it pulls out several different layers of emotion from you. There's a victory that you feel because you're rooting for him, and then there's the dread you feel as you realize how much the manipulation, the lies are controlling people. And so it plays on all these different levels. It has massive thrilling action and excitement. So I loved this movie, easily one of the best of 2024. So there you have it. These are my picks for the best of 2024 in film and television. You can create your own graphic using the Best of Watchlist feature on IMDb. If you create it using their app, take a screenshot of it, share it on Instagram stories, over on Twitter, tag me, as well as use hashtag IMDb. I will see and I will share some of your lists. I'm looking forward to seeing what your picks for the best of the year were. Thanks so much for watching, and keep talking movies and TV too much. Bye-bye.